It's good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew version 1.0 deck lists of the Commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing it, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. So also really appreciate if you could interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe, consider checking out the links down in the description. I really appreciate it. Discord's live, and Mikey and I are in there chatting. We'd love to chat with you. But today, we're finishing up week one of our Innistrad celebration for Innistrad Remastered. And today, we're taking a look at a card that wasn't printed in Innistrad's set, but it's got two very popular Innistrad characters, and that's Thalia and the Gitrog monster. Of course, Martian Machine had a bunch of team-ups, and this is one of my favorites of the team-ups they did. An Abzan commander that has First Strike and Death Touch. You can play an additional land on each of your turns. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And whenever it attacks, you sack a creature or land and then draw a card. What I've always loved about this creature is it really combines the fun of Thali and Gitrog together and makes a really fun commander in Abzan. I think this was really the first Abzan kind of landfall commander that we all really had access to until we got Necrobloom in Modern Horizons 3. But I like Thalia because you get a little bit of that light stacks, you get a little bit of the land stuff that matters, and you get a little bit of the graveyard stuff that matters, which I think makes it an interesting commander that we can have some fun with. That's our goal, kind of playing that landfall game, adding a few more stacks pieces as well, and really utilizing our graveyard for profit. But I think what's important is taking the fact that we could already play, another land and add more to it, right? What Gitrog's style of the deck does so well is playing lands back out of our graveyard, which is something we want to do here. But we'd love to play them multiple times if we can. So things like Dryad, Elysian Grove, and Exploration will allow us to play lands more times. Now, the Gitrog Ravenous Ride is in here to potentially just overcharge the amount of lands we could play in a turn, allowing us to potentially draw and put some lands down if we saddle it up and sacrifice the creature that it saddles. Now, Gitrog isn't a huge part of the deck. It's just one of those fun things that if we see it, it really adds to our thing. But we really want to be attacking with Thalia, right, and the Gitrog, and using its ability to sack and draw some cards. But I think where the deck's probably really going to shine, unsurprisingly, is Landfall. When you have a commander that cares about playing multiple lands and other ways to play multiple lands, I think Landfall obviously becomes the logical next step. And there's a lot of ways to take a look at this. In fact, Abzan has some of my favorite ways to, or Golgari has some of my favorite ways to do this type of thing. Nis of the Shadowed Boughs is something I've always enjoyed. Whenever a land comes in, you can put a loyalty counter on it, and you can -5 her to put a creature card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control onto the battlefield from your hand or graveyard with 2 counters on it. This is a killer ability because it allows you to not only reanimate back out of your graveyard, but put something from your hand down, which is great. You can also turn a land into the creature and untap it, which is actually relevant. That you don't have to just use it as a creature. You could, in fact, just untap a land you control and use it again. Avenger of Zendikar, classic landfall payoff. When it comes in, you make a bunch of plants for each land you control, and whenever a land comes in, you grow the plants. A great engine to start taking over the game and have some threats for your opponents. A Mirror Angel makes you a bird whenever a land comes in, again, kind of amassing you some threats to hit your opponents with. Vine Lasher lets us deal 1 damage to target opponent whenever a land comes in, and we can offspring it to actually get 2 of them. It isn't each opponent, which is a little bit of a downside, but it still being target opponent is still helpful. Although red is going to take a little bit longer to get all of your opponents with it, you could still get someone. Lotus Cobra, whenever a land comes in, you get to add a mana of any color. Great for lands that are coming in tap, because you could still, right, utilize a mana from them, and even better when they come in untapped, right, because then you just net a mana from it. Mossborn Hydra comes in with a counter on it, and then whenever a land comes in, you double the number of counters on it. It's going to become a huge threat with trample that our opponents have to deal with. Rampaging Baloth makes us a 4/4 beast when a land comes in. Scootsworm makes us a 1/1 insect, but if we have 6 or more lands, it starts making copies of itself, just starting to multiply. And if our opponents can't stop the Scootsworms, it can easily take over a game by just multiplying and multiplying. Tireless Provisioner is probably one of our favorite landfall outlets, making us a treasure or a food whenever land comes in. Obviously, most of the time we want that treasure because it's access to more mana, but the foods can be helpful if we need some life or we need something else to do something else with. We're playing 2 of the retreats from The Battle for Zendikar, both of them do one of two things whenever a land comes in. Hagra's going to either give a creature a little buff and death touch on a turn, or have everybody lose one and we gain one. That's the ability we really want off of the Hagra. And then off of Kazandu, we either gain 2 life or put a counter on a creature, and the counter is the one we really want, unless we really need the life, growing some creatures. And then Feldar Retreat kind of harkens back, right, to these retreats, right? It gives you the choice to either get a token or put a counter on each creature you control, and they get vigilance till end of turn. A great ability, right? Especially if we have these tokens laying around from all these landfall abilities to take and then start getting into combat, right? So we love seeing stuff like this once we have a couple tokens down and we can take advantage of them in combat. But Thali and Gitrog, like Gitrog before it, want to care about the graveyard. And there's a lot of ways we could take a look at this, but I think the big one is allowing us to play lands out of our graveyard. Now, that may seem odd to a layman because you're going to say, why would you want to play lands out of your graveyard? How are you getting lands into your graveyard? The truth is, there's a couple ways to look at it. You can either mill cards off the top of your library with something like 6, and then allow you to play the lands back out of your graveyard, or there are cards that will allow you to sacrifice lands for certain abilities, and then you'll be able to play them back out of your graveyard. That's what we'd prefer of the two, but there are other options. Remember that Thalia can sacrifice a land, right, for its ability. Thalia and Gitrog sacrifices a land for its ability, but there are other things in the deck that do that. Now, Green Warden's pretty great because not only does it let us play lands out of our graveyard, but it will double all of our landfall triggers, which is huge when you start to read that some of these triggers are. 6 mills 3 cards every time it attacks, but it's a really interesting ability. As long as it's our turn, non-land permanents in our graveyard have Retrace. Retrace says that we can cast things out of our graveyard, but as an extra cost, we have to pitch a land to do it. Well, there's the land that we can then play back out of our graveyard, right, with these other abilities, while still getting able to get things back out of our graveyard that go there by milling or other reasons, right? We talked about the Necrobloom, and it makes sense to put it in our deck. It makes a plant anytime a land comes in, but if we have 7 or more lands, it starts making zombies, kind of a callback to Field of the Dead. And it also gives a really fun ability to the lands in our graveyard that they have Dredge too. Dredge is a mechanic that says if we would draw a card, we can mill that many cards instead and just return that card to our hand as our draw. You see that on Life of the Loam there, from the Loam over there on the right. And these cards are very useful because it can fill our graveyard while doing other things, because there are cards in our deck like Titania that say whenever a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, we get to make an elemental. That might not work with Life from the Loam and Necrobloom, but there are other cards in the deck that just care about whenever lands go to the graveyard at all, like the original Gitrog that would do things when that happens. So there are other ways to take advantage of the Dread, but really what's nice about the Dread is filling our graveyard up with lands that we can then use to get back, from all our abilities, or to use for other recursion spells or other things. The point is, whenever you fill up your graveyard, you need to know what you're doing with it. Why are you filling up your graveyard? And there's a lot of reasons to do it. And you're just trying to build your kind of toolbox of why you want things in your graveyard, how you're going to get them back. And that's where I think this deck is going to shine in what you're trying to do. Things like Walk-in Closet also let us play lands back out of our graveyard. Zoran Orb is an example of an artifact that will let us sacrifice a land to gain some life so we could play that land back out of our graveyard, right, with those abilities. And then Hedge Shredder is kind of an interesting one. Whenever it attacks, we mill 2. It says whenever one or more lands are put into your graveyard from your library, you get to put them on the battlefield tapped. So here's a way to take advantage of those Dredge abilities, right, to just get those lands right back onto the battlefield. And then Hedge Shredder can keep looking for more along the process. Remember that Thali and Gitrog has that ability. Creatures our opponents control and non-basic lands they control enter in tapped. And I think we can also pay that off by just putting a little bit more stacks into our deck. Just trying to keep our opponents down a little bit more as we're trying to run our game plan. Arcana of Emiria says that players can't cast more than 1 spell each turn, and non-basic lands our opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. This is going to help us keep our advantage once we have it. Drana Lavala has an interesting ability that all activated abilities of creatures our opponents control can't be activated. So their creatures cannot activate abilities. Remember, that means cost : ability can't be activated. It's a very interesting ability, and it's kind of narrow, right, compared to some other things. But I think it's important against certain decks that really care about those abilities. Elish Norn is just great for us. If a permanent entering the battlefield causes an ability of a permanent we control to trigger, it triggers additional time. That's landfall to a T. That Elish Norn stacks on that a permanents entering the battlefield under our opponent's control do not cause the abilities or permanents our opponents control to trigger. They would still trigger ours, they just don't trigger theirs. And that's a very interesting ability since there's so many things in Magic that care about things entering in or things coming in. So Elesh Norn will shut them down and double ours, which is huge. A huge house of value for just 5 mana. It's something we definitely want to see. Blind Obedience, causing artifacts and creatures our opponents control to enter the battlefield tapped. And then Stony Silence is going to look odd, especially when we just saw Zurin Orb, a card that we really, really want to allow us to sacrifice our lands. But the truth is, if we don't have a ton of artifacts, we don't mind stopping our opponents from using their artifacts altogether as a way to help shut them down as we kind of run our land game plan. Now, there are creatures that sacrifice lands, and in fact, we are playing a few of them in the deck, and there are more. We could lean more into that if we wanted to lean into the Stony Silence more. But the truth is, we're probably not going to see Stony Silence all that often, so we could prepare for it in the games we do see it and make sure that we're not hurting ourselves in the process. Remember that if you're going to play stacks effects, if you're going to play these things, you need to remember that the abilities need to hurt your opponents and not hurt you, and you need to be able to flourish in spite of them. You know, we're not playing the Winter Orbs and the heavy orbs that hurt everybody. We're normally trying to focus on how we limit our opponents, but also help ourselves. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is our version 1.0 shot at Thalia. And I think there's a lot to be learned in testing, which is, do we have enough landfall? Is enough landfall going on that we could profit from this, since it's kind of what our whole deck wants to do? We have some of the +1/+1 counter synergies when lands come in, but we could add more with things like Bristly Bill. The reason Bristly Bill isn't in the list is just because of its actual real-life cost. It and Scythe Cat Cub, which just got printed in Foundations Jumpstart, are both great creatures, and they would help the deck a ton. They're just both not cheap. The reason I like Bill a little bit better is because it does have the ability for 5 mana to double all counters on each creature we control, which is something that we're already kind of paying into with Retreat to Kazando and Roiling Earth in the main deck. But that would be something we get more into. Green Sleeves is another landfall thing that makes tokens. It also gets bigger for the number of lands we control. So it's not a bad threat either. Again, here's just the question of the real life cost being worth it in the slot over something that's a little bit cheaper, but still a great card. And then Sylvan Safekeeper is another example of a creature that could sacrifice a land to do something. Again, here's a way not on an artifact to sacrifice some land. Do we have enough of them? Do we need more of them? And if so, we start to bring some of these things. There are creatures and enchantments that both do it. Start bringing them in, right? To start sacrificing lands and taking advantage of that. But let's do what we do best and get into our playtests. Keep it a 5-lander here with Perennial Behemoth, a card that lets us play lands from our graveyard, and then Sylvan Scrying. Well, let's just go get any land, put it into our hand. Turn 1, we draw Wrenn and Realmbreaker, so this allows all our lands tap for mana of any color. For the +1, we can untap a land and have it become an elemental with haste till end of turn. The -2 mills 3 and puts a permanent from among the milled cards into our hand. And then -7 lets us play land and cast permanent spells from our graveyard. So it's been a great ability, right? Being able to get things back out of our graveyard. I think no matter what we do turn 1, right, something's just going to end up coming in tapped. So there's nothing to do turn 1, so we'll just play a land there. Well, there it is. Turn 2, we see the Rog. Of course, the Gitrog's going to be in here. It's a great house of value on its own, and of course, 1/2 of our commander. But I think we just Sylvan Scrying here. My thought is our Triumph thing that can produce all 3 colors, because we are down on black right now. We do have the Fabled Passage, but I think it makes more sense just to set that up, right, so we have access to it. Now, this will mean that we won't get, if we play that next turn, we wouldn't get to play Wrenn and Realmbreaker. But our commander is 4 mana, so it might make sense to skip a turn if we have no other way to get our black source down, right? Well, Rolling Regrowth could be another way to do it, to play a land, sack one of them to the Rolling Regrowth to go get a swamp. This would actually put us up to 4 mana this turn, but we wouldn't have to do it on our turn. But that, I think, makes the most sense. I mean, we could do Wrenn and Realmbreaker, but the problem is it just, although it would fix it fixes our black problem, it doesn't actually ramp us. I like Rolling Regrowth because it ramps us, and then in the future we can get this land we sack back with the Behemoth. So I think on just someone else's turn, I would Rolling Regrowth. I would go get a forest and a swamp. They both come on the battlefield type. Remember, we have to sacrifice a land to do it. So that's A-okay. But the point is, now we have plenty of mana for our commander. So here I think I would just put in our tap land, get Thalia down. Remember, we can play an additional land on each of our turns, so I think I would probably play and crack this Fabled Passage. Just go get another land. We got 2 white sources, 2 green sources. I'm thinking a swamp just to even out. They'll come in on tap, but that's a-okay. The point is, put up our mana. Remember, Thalia can't attack this turn, but that's a-okay. We're starting to oppress our opponents a little bit with that ability, right? This turn, there's a lot of options. I mean, we could play Gitrog and get another land drop this turn, right? I love the idea of Dryad, which is going to help, even out our things. But if I play Gitrog, I get Twitch to land drops. I just don't have enough to do them, do I? But I would be able to get, like, Ren down. So my thought is Gitrog, land. 1 land for turn, 1 from here. We actually get 1 more. My thought is Ren and Realmbreaker. I'd probably just tick it up, I think. Well, I guess there's the argument. Do you mill a couple with it and try to draw off of Gitrog, right? Or do we just do the +1 and try to work up towards the 7? I mean, right now we don't have a ton of really great things in our graveyard for the purposes of Ren's -7. So I guess there is that argument. My only thought with the milling is potentially draw us off Gitrog, right? Which says whenever one or more lands are put into our graveyard from anywhere, we draw a card. I guess Thalia is going to end up drawing us a card off Gitrog this turn too, right? But let's do it. Let's -2 just to see what we can get. So we mill 3, and then we get to put a permanent from among them back into our hand. Well, I like something like Maha, right? Can start getting us going wide. Now, because we mill all 3 at the same time, we're only going to draw 1 off of Gitrog, but that's a-okay. Well, there's another land drop that we can make this turn where we get 1 more because of Gitrog. So I think I'll do that, and then go to combat, have Thalia attack. We'll just sacrifice a basic land. That's going to have Gitrog draw us a card again because a land hit the graveyard. And now, I mean, I think we're in really good shape. Remember that we have to sack a land to keep the Gitrog around, which we don't mind because I think this next turn we can play Perennial Behemoth, right? And we have enough lands in our graveyard, right, that we can sack to Thalia and keep playing back out of our graveyard. So my thought here is you come to the next turn where we get 3 land drops per turn. We have to sack 1 at the start, so we'll sack a swamp. That'll draw us a card because of Gitrog. My thought is play Maha, so that's Maya. So that's 5 there. We've got 2 lands left. If we play a land here, that gets us a 1/1 white human warrior. Gets us one of those. Say we've got 2 more land drops. We can't play them back out of the graveyard just yet. Right, but we've got 3 mana now. Vesuva can come in. It's a copy of anything. Well, I guess it just come in as a copy of the Triumph just to get another source, but that still leaves us with 3. Do we like Entish Restoration to go get a couple more lands, but they come in tapped? Would get us a couple of humans. I guess there's no way to get the Perennial Behemoth down this turn, but I don't think this is bad. 3 kind of seems great for the Entish. So we go to we'll go to combat and attack. We'll sacrifice a land with Thalia to do it. Victimize is great for the future, right? Especially if things get killed that way. But I think I would just pass for now. Again, it stinks to not have any way to cast them out of the graveyard just yet. I guess we'll up Ren. But on somebody else's turn, I think I just Entish Restoration. Sack the forest, which would draw us a card, but I think we have to finish resolving the spell first. So we'll do plains. And we'll do a swamp if we could find one. So that draws us a card off Gitrog because we sacked the land. 2 lands come in, so that's a couple more warriors, right? So now we're starting to build a decent board right here with these warriors as our lands are coming in, right? Lotus Corp is great, giving us some mana when things happen that way. We come to our turn, right? Start of our upkeep. We have to sack a land, so we will. That'll draw a card with Gitrog, right? Ooh, AOZ is great. Since we're already up at 8 lands, and with a Perennial Behemoth, we could actually be even bigger than that, right? Since we can play a couple lands out of our graveyard this turn. If we go Behemoth plus a Lotus Cobra, we could play what? 1, 2, 3 lands of our graveyard and net 3 mana. We could actually, I think, get Perennial Behemoth, Lotus Cobra, and then 1, 2, 3 out of our graveyard, right? Because 1, 2 second land drop, third land drop. We could even, I think we can net the mana from the Lotus Cobra and still play Avenger of Zendikar this turn, which would lead us pretty darn quickly towards the end of the game. Unless anybody can wipe the board, we would get a bunch of 1/1s, get all the plants, and then next turn, right, we can play more lands out of our graveyard and just keep this train rolling. So we'll move into the next one because I think that kind of shows what we want the deck to do. We're just trying to test to see, what that looks like, right, time over time as we try to do this. 4-lander with Blind Obedience, Assassin's Trophy, some removal, and the Emiria Angel. So we've got one of our landfall payoffs there. Canopy Vista is going to come in tapped no matter what, and it's going to make 2 of our check lands come in untapped, so that makes a ton of sense. The forest wouldn't. We would still need the Plains of the Swamp there for the Isolated Chapel. Well, turn 2, we see a Rampant Growth. Okay, well, that could get us started. That could actually get us a turn 3. This could actually get us a turn 3 Thalia, which wouldn't be bad at all. So I think we'll do that. We'll just go ahead and get I think we're going to get a Swamp here just to round out our colors. And again, we don't mind taking the turn off because this turn we can play Thalia. And we could get an extra land down, but the question is, do we want to wait till we can get a landfall payoff? I guess we have no way of getting them back out of our graveyard, do we? I thought it was, do we wait till we get the Angel down so we can net some tokens? But I think my gut tells me you just play it, right? Thalia can't attack this turn, so we move into the next turn. Ooh, Scoot Swarm. See, yeah, that's pretty great as well, right? To get those down and get them moving. We could go Scoot plus the Blind Obedience. Attack with Thalia, sacrifice a swamp to draw a card. And ooh, there's the Lotus Cobra, right? So we're getting even better now. Now we just need to, get the mana to get these things down, and we're going to start pumping out some real value. Turn 5, we didn't hit a land, which is a huge bummer, right? But we also don't really have any great ways to play them out of our graveyard. So I think we're just going to try like Wrenn and Realmbreaker. And then -2 to mill 3 and put a permanent from among them into our hand. The goal there is to hit a land. Fill up our graveyard a little bit. So that was 3 to do. So we don't have enough mana to play Lotus Cobra before we play this mana for this land. So we'll just get the insect there. Attack with Thalia, I'll just sack the insect that we made to draw a card, right? Just try to churn through our deck, right? Just try to get into more things and keep the process going. There we see Thespian Stage. So the nice part is, right, all of our lands are tapping for everything, so we're not super worried about that. I'm thinking if we go Lotus Cobra plus Hagra, we could play a land and just get 2 mana out of it. I don't know how far the 2 mana is going to get us, though. Could Gitrog and saddle it with something, but I don't really have anything quite yet to saddle it for. We could Emiria Angel. We can Emiria Angel to get that token process working, but I really like getting Hagra down and get it started. I guess there's also a logic to leave up some removal as well, right? Because obviously we're getting to the point where that could be important. I really don't want a -2 Wrenn because there's, we can use her to get things back out of the graveyard, but I feel like the answer is Hagra plus Lotus Cobra. Get the Thespian Stage down, and then just tick up Wrenn to make one of them into a land. That'll make us another 1/1 insect, so we can attack, right? Sack the insect, draw a card, right? Because of Thalia, we do have a second land drop, so we could actually play that Rot Farm pick up one of the lands we had this turn, another insect and a mana. So we're just working our way along. That's 2 triggers there of the Hagra, so that's not too bad. Working into our next turn, now we have 2 lands to play. We go what? Emiria Angel, land. 6 actually. That insect would have been a copy of Scoot Swarm, right? Because it's 6 lands. So this is going to make 2 copies of Scooty. This is going to make 4 copies of Scooty. And then we'll get that 1/1 bird. And now we're in great shape, right? To get that started, we've got 2 more mana we can use if we want to. Probably just tick up Wrenn. Attack, probably sack the bird to draw a card. And then now I think our engines start to come together. A little clunky. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more card draw somehow, or some ways to use our graveyard to some degree. But that's okay. I mean, this is why you test to understand, right, your average understanding of how the deck's working, and then try to figure out how to make it better, right, once we are in testing. But let's go with playtest number 3, keeping a 4-lander with Natural Order. There's a 5-lander, with Natural Order and Scoot Swarm. Natural Order is a green spell. It says you could sack a green creature to go get a green creature of your choice and put it on the battlefield. There's a lot of options with that. Gitrog, Avenger of Zendikar, Green Warden. I mean, there's a lot of options. So let's not back ourselves into a corner too much yet on what we want to do with it. But I think we'll do that. Again, we can't play Thalia here no matter what. So I think we just get the Scoot Swarm down, right? We drew the Green Warden, so that's nice. We're working our way up there. Here, I can't play the Cultivate and Thalia, so I think I want to get Thalia going. Sorry, that would have made me an insect there when I play that. We can get Scooty in for the attack if we want to, but I think we just play another land, get another insect, right? Just get the process started. Here in the next turn, we could play our 2 lands, and that would actually start getting me Scoot Swarms. Right now, I can cast Green Warden, which I think makes more sense, because then this would make me 2 insects, right? This makes me 2 copies of Scoot Swarm, right? I'll have lots of things to sacrifice for Thalia. Go to combat, sack 1 and draw, right? And now, we're just in great shape. We could play lands out of our graveyard if we have them, but now the Scoot Swarm train's really rolling. And I think it would make sense on our next turn to maybe go for something like Avenger of Zendikar now that we have enough lands. There's a lot of different choices in our green things in our deck. But here, 3 Scoot Swarms, 6 Scoot Swarms, right? Because we have 3 of them. We have Cultivate. We can go digging, right, for more. Get more Scoot Swarms. I think the only thing now is just like, do we have any big way to buff our board? I think that's the one thing maybe our deck might be missing on hindsight, is a way to turn these Scoot Swarms into threats other than just being 1/1s. But if I Cultivate now, I'm getting 1 land to the battlefield, 1 into my hand, and then I can play it, making 9 the first time and 18 the second time. Just a ton of Scoot Swarms. And if no one has a board wipe, we can just keep the train rolling. So that feels like a good place to stop. We kind of saw it. We're just looking for that right piece to get on. But I think that with that many Scoot Swarms, we're just going to keep attacking, right, overwhelming the board and getting in for damage. But let me know what you think of Thali and the Rog down in the comment section below. If you have a Thali and Rog deck, I'd love to know what you think of my list. What could I do better? What cards am I missing? I'd love to chat with you guys about that in the comment section below. And I